Welcome to our Candidates Forum for Portland City Council Position 3. It will last approximately 45 minutes. I'm your moderator, Debbie Kay, with the League of Women Voters of Portland. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that works to help citizens make informed choices in elections. We do not endorse any candidate or political party, but rather we give voters the information that they need to select a candidate. Membership information is available on our website, in this brochure in the room, and at the table. We thank Neil Kelly Design and Paloma Clothing for their generous contributions to our education fund to make these forums possible. Today's forum is being recorded by Portland Community Media, and we appreciate their doing so. This is the second of 6 forums that the League of Women Voters is presenting before the May 20th primary election. All forums will be available for on-demand viewing from a link on the League's website, lwvpdx.org. To view the forums on local access cable TV, see the playback schedule posted on our website and in your program today. Voters can also look at our nonpartisan Voters Guide for answers to questions posed to all candidates, as well as balanced presentation of the ballot measure. The Voters Guide is here in print form and also on our website, lwvpdx.org, and you will find copies at all Multnomah County Library branches and the Elections Office as well. Another important voter resource is housed at the Secretary of State's website. It's called ORSTAR and enables you to see the financial sources for campaigns, basically to follow the money. Type ORESTAR into your browser. And finally, to see information about the candidates and ballot measures that will appear on your ballot, go to vote411.org, enter your street address and follow the instructions, and the Voter's Guide information for only those items on your ballot will appear. The candidates in today's forum are running in the May 20th primary election. If one candidate for the position receives 50% plus 1 votes in the primary, that candidate will be declared the winner. If no one receives more than 50% of the vote, the top 2 candidates will appear on the November general election ballot. If you've not yet registered to vote, the last day to do so is April 29. Contact your county elections office or register online at voteoregon.org. Ballots will be mailed beginning April 30th. Now to our forum. The League of Women Voters has invited all the candidates running for City Council Position 3. Present today and seated at my left in the order they will appear on the ballot are 3 out of the 4 candidates. They are Joe Meyer, Nicholas Caleb, and Dan Saltzman. Leah Marie Dumas could not be here. I will rotate the questions for each round so that the same candidate is not always the first to answer, and the candidates will have 1 minute to respond. Members of the audience are invited to write your questions, please write legibly, on the cards being distributed for this purpose. Timekeepers sitting in the front row, thank you, will signal a 15-second warning and then stop when the speaker's time has expired. And now let us begin. First question, beginning with Mr. Meyer. Given the limitations of Oregon's current tax system, what ideas do you have for meeting the service needs and infrastructure needs of Portland?
Well, thanks, Ms. Kay. I'm so happy to be here. I feel like this is what democracy looks like. And I've interviewed many of you at KBOO, and I just feel like my heart's overflowing there. I think the first thing I want to say in that regard is austerity is false, basically. I mean, we're spending $1 billion on the reservoirs. We don't need to do that. We're spending an unknown amount of money on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. We're not getting anything for our money there. I think we need to get to simple fairness first. Austerity is false. We can do a lot if we cooperate. Another idea I have is to combine our public schools with our parks department. We have these beautiful buildings, some in need of repair, and we can't move forward on this issue unless we build a new $65 million community center. We have the facilities in our neighborhood. Let's be smarter. Let's not believe this austerity. My name is Joe Meyer. I hope I have your support.
Mr. Caleb?
I guess I have a similar starting response to Joe. I don't believe that the limitations in our tax structure actually as severe as they are made out to be. At the state level, we've seen a lot of stuff with Nike getting 30-year tax cuts and all the rest, but we have a revenue bureau that can raise revenue just fine if we want to do it, and there are plenty of sources within the city that we can look to for that. One of the ideas that I'm sure we'll get to talk about that I've been proposing lately is with a $15 minimum wage, and as many of you probably know, we're actually preempted from raising the minimum wage in a traditional way. So the plan that I put forward is actually a progressive tax, a living wage tax, that would target the largest employers first in order to subsidize small businesses being able to pay equitable wages to their employees. And so there's just one example of an idea where you could institute progressive taxes in order to get the policies that we want in the city.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman.
Well, I believe that any new, well, thanks first of all to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum today. I appreciate it very much. I believe that any new revenue sources should be approved by voters, and that's what I've done in my career here. We referred the arts tax to voters. Voters overwhelmingly approved it 3 times now. I've led the effort to pass the Portland Children's Levy, and I'm pleased to say voters have overwhelmingly approved that 3 times. So I think the whole question is to ask voters and to give voters a meaningful opportunity to weigh in on new revenue sources. And I think sometimes we've been guilty of not doing that, and I think we need to do more of that.
Thank you. Our next question, starting with you, Mr. Caleb. The mayor is proposing to reorganize Portland's urban renewal districts. What do you see as optimal outcomes from this reorganization?
I think it's a good sign that we've opened the discussion about urban renewal districts in general. I think that I agree with actually this body's suggestion about the PSU urban renewal district a few years back, where they said that it was going to take money away from other sources such as county spending and also our schools. And so I'm not a big fan of urban renewal in general. I think it's been nationwide and in Portland has been a vehicle for displacement of peoples and for rewarding developers at the expense of a lot of other city needs. And the reorganization, as I understand it so far, is that we'll shift from traditional urban renewal to do something that's been called placemaking. And I teach geography, so I'm familiar with terms like placemaking, but when I actually get down in the details of what I know so far, it doesn't seem to me to be placemaking in the way that I'm aware of it, which usually means from the ground up, people having sort of Jane Jacobs style input in their communities. I see Portland's development style is very much top-down, and the urban renewal districts are one of the ways in which that happens. So I would like to see a lot more community-driven development, and I have some ideas for empowering communities on that.
Thank you.
Well, I support Mayor Hales' efforts to redraw some of the urban renewal boundaries with the goal of freeing up more revenue for the city's general fund, which pays for police and fire and parks, but also frees up money for school districts and also for county government for their general funds as well. I'm not an apologist for urban renewal. I think urban renewal has done some fantastic things in this city, and I think we have a lot to be thankful about, but I do think that we have drawn the boundaries too generously and frozen the tax bases too low, so that it's time to adjust some of these districts and pare them back. As I said, so we can free up revenues for more other important government services.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer.
Well, I think what's missing now in City Hall really is balance. I mean, the idea of an urban renewal district is neither good nor bad. However, where's the voice of the citizen? Every time I see something like this, I see really a developer-centric approach. This is not good for 2 reasons, at least. One is you're unlikely to get the best use of the land. If you just have 4 of your buddies in the back room doing a deal, how are we going to hear from the voice of the people? I agree with Nick. Let's bring it out to the neighborhoods. The ideas are neither good nor bad. It's in the process of making it move forward. In City Hall right now, I do not see a representative of Joe Citizen. I claim to be Joe Citizen. Thank you.
Thank you. Our third question, beginning with Mr. Saltzman. How should our limited housing resources be spent, considering the costs of building housing in various parts of the city and the severe shortage of housing affordable to very low-income households?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. As Portland's housing commissioner for almost a year now, I've been tackling those very questions. I'm pleased to say that we were going to be putting out about $18 million worth of dollars to invest in affordable housing, and for the first time, there's going to be guidelines on total cost and cost controls about the units of housing produced. So that's one way to tackle the issue, is to put some firm cost controls on the developer fees. Secondly, I've also proposed, and we'll be bringing to City Council next month, a proposal to basically create an affordable housing density bonus. We have density bonuses in place now for things like eco roofs or bike lockers. We don't have a density bonus for affordable housing. The whole idea would be to incent developers to do affordable housing, or else to pay into an affordable housing fund to also create some funding for affordable housing, which is also very much something we need.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer.
Well, housing is certainly an important issue. I don't think anybody likes to walk past somebody on the street. I feel like that hurts the citizen walking past as much as anybody. I remember when I first came to town, we had a 10-year plan to end homelessness. The incumbent's been in city council for 16 years. If he has some new good ideas, why are more and more people on the street? There's a development just down the street for me. They have an easement, an adjustment. They're going to put 7 stories in where there wasn't allowed before. There's no voice at the table for the citizen. We can ask, can we have affordable housing as part of this plan? We don't have anybody asking. We need a regular Joe at city council. Thank you.
Mr. Caleb.
I like some of what I just heard from Commissioner Saltzman about affordable housing cost controls. I think that is a good idea. Also making provision for more affordable housing units per development, I think, is a good idea. Right now, the city's planning on shifting some affordable housing funding up into North and Northeast Portland where it's needed, but unfortunately it's taking away from affordable housing at different places in the city, so I'm sad about that. In general, I don't think we should transition to moving our affordable housing money into workforce housing has been proposed lately. I think we should keep it in affordable housing. And I sympathize with what Joe Meyer is getting at in terms of the homelessness issue, and I hope we have a chance to talk a little bit more about that sometime.
Thank you. Our next question, beginning with Mr. Meyer. The U.S. Department of Justice found a number of problems with our police bureau's use of force against mentally ill residents and our police oversight system. To what extent should all members of City Council be responsible for monitoring the Department of Justice settlement agreement and for overseeing the police bureau in general?
Well, that's an excellent question. That's really where the rubber hits the road in terms of our freedom, isn't it? And does all city council need to be involved? I don't know. I think citizens need to feel like they have open access to that process. And the mechanism for getting to that is not clear. What's certainly clear is we're not there now. And we're not there now in a way that seems avoidable. I don't think it's good for the man on the street, the policeman on the street, to ask him to do what he has to do. And certainly the citizens of Portland need to feel like if an officer steps over the line, he can be reprimanded. I don't see that in City Hall. Some of the worst abuses in a generation were under the incumbents' oversight of the Portland Police Department. Portland Police marched on City Hall, and the commissioner backed down. I'm happy that the police union is strong. I want City Hall to also be strong. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Caleb?
Well, I'm happy that the settlement was able to highlight issues with taking care of our mentally ill population and having better training for the police to do that. I think the settlement did leave out a lot of the cultural problems with the police, including racial profiling within the city. I'm of the position that we have to create independent police review commissions that are staffed by citizens that have the ability to both subpoena and dismiss bad officers if they're found to be having misconduct. I don't know of any other mechanisms which we could put in the city that provide that straightforward of a disincentive to doing naughty things. And until we get that, I think we're just kind of like spinning around and not really getting to the issue at hand.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman.
Well, I was the commissioner that called for the Department of Justice to investigate the Portland Police Bureau. And so I welcome the findings of their inquiry, although it ended up in a slightly different direction than when I originally requested they come in. I thought it was going to be more about issues around race. It turned out their focus and identification of the problem turned out to be around mental health. Not to say that we still don't need to pay a lot of attention to both. I think that the City Council, as part of the settlement agreement, the City Council will have, each City Council member will have more oversight over the implementation of the settlement. We've each been asked to appoint one person to the Citizen Oversight Committee. and I've already made my appointment. The committee is not up and running yet. And over the years, we have strengthened the independent police review function in the city auditor's office to a point where I think they have the ability to do meaningful investigations and totally independent investigations of alleged police misbehavior.
Thank you. Our next question, beginning with Mr. Caleb. How can the city plan for meeting the future employment needs of Portland residents?
Well, I think right now what the city's plan is to give tax cuts to any large employer that we can possibly bring into the city, so like City Target, and maybe that opens the door for more Walmarts in the city. I don't like that as a model of economic development. I think it's broadly called neoliberalism, right? Government creates the conditions for big business to kind of, we hope we get some kind of kickbacks. I like small businesses, I like cooperatives. I want to incentivize the creation of a creative economy here. I want to find ways to subsidize our artists. I want to continue to have nonprofits grow here that can protect the local environment and can help with local social justice issues. So those are my preferences for development is bottom up, and that's pretty generally how I think about most things, I'd say.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman?
Well, we still very much, despite upward ticks in the economy, we still very much have a joblessness huge issue here in Oregon. Unemployment rate still around 8%. People who've been out of the workforce longer than 15 weeks are, their unemployment rate is 75%. So I very much believe we need to work hard to get more good jobs here, but they need to be good jobs. They need to be jobs more economic opportunities for Portlanders that are going to produce a higher standard of living. And towards that end, I support equal pay for equal work. I support a higher minimum wage. And I'm pleased to have been one of the unanimous city council members to create a paid sick leave ordinance, the first city in the state of Oregon that recognizes that people need to be able to be paid when they're sick so they won't get us sick, or when they need to take care of a relative. So these are all ways to boost our standard of living, but I'll just close by saying we need to focus on things we do well here, and that is the creative economy, software development, clean tech, outdoor apparel, and advanced manufacturing. Those are areas we have our best advantages in.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer?
I agree with the small business approach. Small businesses really are the job creators. For example, my friend Mike Glover makes shoes. You may see him biking around town with half a cow on his back, and he didn't get any kind of big tax break. Let's open up innovations. We don't need to give the big guys dollars to come here. Let's make Portland a super livable city and invite small businesses in. My own personal story, I came here 12 years ago with my small software company, and there's a fantastic environment for software here. I want to tap into that. I want to give the individual in Northeast Portland access to these new open source tools. Use that to let people help themselves, move themselves up the economic ladder. I think programming is a good opportunity for Portland. Thank you.
What can the city do to increase transparency and accountability in how water and sewer dollars are spent? Beginning with Mr. Saltzman.
Well, I think that's something that I've made some proposals to do. I've proposed establishing an independent utility commission that would be composed of 5 people. They would be staffed through the city auditor's office, our sort of unbiased elected official in the building. And their decisions on rates could only be overturned by a 4/5 majority of city council. What hung up my proposal is that last part requires a charter change by voters, and I was unable to get that through the Charter Commission of 2 years ago. But I hope this independent water district is defeated, and I believe the City Council is open to ideas such as mine, and take another look at the Independent Utility Commission, and I think that will provide a lot more transparency to how we set water and sewer rates.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer?
Well, from Forest to Faucet, Portland City Hall did have responsibility for the best water system in the world, and I think as many people who are observing that for the last dozen years, they've failed. They failed in ways that are large and small. They failed the trust of ratepayers. As a recent court case came out, Judge Michael Simon found abuses large and small. It's a pattern and practice of abuse. It's not a few things to fix. I'm a strong supporter of the Portland Public Water District. I think we need to move forward in that direction. I think the clearest example that the Portland Water Bureau is not trying to get out of these LT2 regulations is that Rochester, New York has a similar open reservoir system. They wrote a simple letter to the EPA and they got a 10-year delay in compliance. Now this rule is up for refinement in 2 years. They may never have to do anything. The chief spin doctor for the Portland Water Bureau is David Schaff. He's still in charge. City Hall is not serious about making changes. Join me in supporting the water district. Thank you.
Mr. Caleb.
So we're nationally recognized as being a very non-transparent city. Recently, the Public Interest Research Group put out a study that gave us a D-. So of the cities that they actually studied, we were near the bottom. And I actually do sympathize with a lot of the concerns of the folks that put together the PPWD. I'm not a supporter. In fact, I actually wrote my own initiative that we're currently gathering signatures for right now. It's called the People's Water Trust. And the People's Water Trust is based around transparency and accountability. I was actually kind of sad that when the city had an opportunity to propose an alternative to the PPWD that they didn't pull some of the ideas that we had put forward, because I think they're very good. Some of the provisions that would be useful for dealing with the transparency issue is that it actually provides for any citizen to have access to any document without undue cost or undue delay. We live in an era where everything's electronically available already. That we should have to wait on documents from the city is unbelievable. In 2014, it has provisions that would control conflicts of interest, and so with regard to water policy, any contribution of more than $50 would be considered to be a conflict of interest, and any elected official or bureau official who was going to make policy that would benefit one of those donors or somebody they had a conflict of interest would have to recuse themselves. And if that conflict was discovered later, then the vote would have to be redone. There's more, but I'm out of time.
Thank you. Beginning with Mr. Meyer, what steps should the city take to proactively overcome historic patterns of segregation, promote fair housing choice, and foster inclusive communities for all under the requirements of the Civil Rights Act of 1968?
Very good. Well, I think access to government is one thing we can certainly work on. One of the first things I'm going to do if elected commissioner is to open up a storefront on North MLK Boulevard and hang out a sign that says City Hall North. And I'm going to sit there and listen. I think that's the first step. I'm just starting to educate myself about the harms of redlining and other racist policies we have. I also want to look closely at the police department. If a man can't drive down the street in peace, that's not equal opportunity. If a man won't call the police because if he's afraid of getting shot in the back, that's not equal opportunity. We have a long way to go. It's going to take moral leadership at City Hall. You're not going to get it from a pro-business candidate. I'm Joe Meyer. I hope I have your support.
Mr. Caleb? Happily. What steps should the city take to proactively overcome historic patterns of segregation, promote fair housing choice, and foster inclusive communities for all as required by the Civil Rights Act of 1968?
I think Portland is another thing that we shouldn't be proud of too much is we're nationally recognized for not doing much about gentrification at all. And neighborhoods in North and Northeast Portland have been victimized by patterns of gentrification for generations now. I think we've got to figure out ways to give communities the ability to have decisions about what kind of developments come into their neighborhood. It's very difficult with private property rights how they are. It's very difficult because the state has limited our options as far as what we can do on rent controls. I think we can be very creative about getting around those things and putting in policies that help us. Back to the PDC, anything that the PDC has a say in is a public body. So if the PDC reformed its mission instead of building the biggest projects that had the biggest payoffs at any time and started picking up land and asking communities from the ground up, what do you want in your community? Do you want a community garden? Do you want affordable housing? Do you want a supermarket? It would avoid a lot of these conflicts and also give communities that input so that they could keep the character they wanted for the long term.
Well, I think that those are very big issues, and I guess my 3-second answer is I think we need to focus on three things. One is mixed income housing. I think when people of all walks of life live in close proximity to one another, that's a better societal objective. And towards that end, we need to make sure that we have adequate housing for all income levels, from very low income to upper income. But let's not forget workforce housing. We need to be able to have people to be able to live near where they work. And finally, I would like to see more housing be in good school districts. So it's not rocket science, but kids who grow up in good school districts do better in life. So those are three things that I stand for that I think will address fair housing, housing inequality, and displacement. Finally, I have a proposal on the table to require that any housing developments that use city dollars require that that 50% of the residents must come from the neighborhood who live in that new development.
Thank you. Homelessness continues to be a serious problem in Portland. While most homeless persons are law-abiding, their very presence makes some citizens feel unsafe. What specific steps should City Council take to address the discomfort and conflict that occurs without impinging on homeless persons' civil rights?
I'm sorry. So I actually have been having a lot of conversations with folks at Right to Dream 2, for example, and am interested in creative ways of solving homelessness. I'm being educated, and I'm happy that I am, from thinking about homelessness as like a disease or something like that. It's not, right? It's not a condition. It's something that people all get to in different ways. And homelessness isn't something that you necessarily can solve in the same way that you could solve a medical problem. And so I really like the work that R2D2 has done for pioneering things like rest areas and rest camps and all the rest, and I like some of the proposals that they have. I'm a recent signatory to the Western Regional Advocacy Project's Homeless Bill of Rights, and I think that people who are homeless have good ideas for how they could be helped, and I look to them actually for ideas on how to solve this problem rather than try to impose top-down solutions.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman?
Well, since becoming housing commissioner again about a year ago, Mayor Hales and myself have had a lot of good meetings with people who represent homeless individuals or people who are homeless themselves. And I think, like Nick said, they have a lot of great ideas. And some of those ideas we're moving ahead on. But I think that, one of the things I'm proud to say I've done since I've been housing commissioner was to get the city council to approve almost $2 million in additional funds this year to invest in keeping people from having to go on the streets in the first place, through things like eviction prevention and foreclosure prevention services, and also speedier exits out of the shelter system once they do enter shelters through short-term rental assistance and access to housing. And I think there is a certain level of discomfort that people have around homelessness. It could be two things. One, there but for the grace of God go I. Second is just, sometimes it's hard for people to mix, but I think that's something that we as a city need to consciously work on, and we need to treat all people with respect and dignity.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like that. Treat all people with respect and dignity. I think my approach is more hands-on. I guess I can talk about how I personally overcame those fears. I had my chance at KBOO to do live reporting from Occupy, and I stayed overnight there. And at night it was quite scary. I remember there was a man as big as a mountain walking down the center of that camp, and I felt like he could have crushed me with his little thumb if he just moved his arm a little bit, and he was ranting and raving, and someone came out and gave him a hug. And that had a big impact on me. So I think, like my colleagues say, let's be humane to everyone. Let's listen to ideas from the streets. I've also slept out at the vigil. I think in order to serve a class of people, we want to walk among them first. And one thing I certainly learned is that I have 15 seconds left, and that there's all kinds of reasons that people are homeless. There's not going to be one solution. Let's get on the street, let's meet people. And as citizens, I encourage you to introduce yourself if you see someone on the street. Don't be afraid.
Thank you. On a somewhat lighter note, Portland is increasingly a tourist destination. What amenities would you promote to improve the tourist experience, and how would you finance them? Mr. Saltzman.
Well, one of the efforts, I do serve on the Travel Portland Board. I represent the city, which is our tourist promotion agency, and one of the things I led the effort with their support was an effort for them to tax themselves, which passed the city council. You may be surprised, no argument from us if you want to tax yourselves, and that money goes to increasingly promoting Portland as a tourist destination and using up empty hotel rooms, employing people. It's a very important employment sector in our city, and I'm pleased to say that room revenues are way up from a year ago. We market heavily to places in the winter, like Seattle and Vancouver, BC. because we find that people from California aren't going to come here in the winter period. So let's invest in like-minded areas, and this has been paying off very handsomely. I'm sure you've all seen the 2 Days in Seattle campaign. Well, we have our own campaigns going on up in Seattle and Vancouver, BC, and they're providing full rooms and good jobs here in Portland.
Thank you. Joe.
I love being a tourist in Portland. I'm a tourist in Portland every weekend. I think the best way we can bring tourists in is to continue to make Portland a livable city. I'm not sure we need a separate program, or I'm not sure what kind of bang for your buck you're getting with advertising campaigns. For me, I love Portland. Let's really make it possible and plausible for people to swim in the Willamette River and have all kinds of fun. Maybe we can have a toboggan down the east slope or something. Thank you.
Mr. Caleb.
So I also don't think that we need to put a lot more attention into drawing people to the city. Everyone knows about Portland now, whether that's a result of Portlandia or whatever. I move pretty regularly through different neighborhoods and stop into different pubs, and the amount of people that are just staying here from other places is unreal. It's becoming an international city very quickly. We don't have to do much in that regard. The problem, or depending on who you are, the plus of that is that a lot of people actually want to move here at the same time. It's becoming that popular. So people are moving in, and we're not doing enough to keep existing residents in their homes. So this, again, comes back to housing issues, housing fairness issues, rent controls, and all the rest. I think that's where we need to put our energy, not necessarily into drawing people. Everyone wants to come here. It's a great place. We've already established that. We've done that. Now we need to make sure that the city doesn't change so much that it's not a place where people that live here right now actually want to live.
Thank you.
Or can live.
Beginning with Mr. Meyer. One role of a city commissioner is manager of a large bureau. Please describe your management experience and style.
I would like my management experience, my management style to mimic that of the late Charles Jordan. He was the first African-American commissioner of Portland. I picked up his biography just a few weeks ago. And his style, and I hope my style, will be to be able to ground all decisions we make in morality, philosophy, and logic. When we have some decisions coming out of City Hall, I don't know about you, but sometimes it's hard to know what the logic is. Maybe it's part of 3 different deals, one involving $6 million of water pipes for a transportation project, or maybe a half a dozen other things mixed up in there. Let's have all of our decisions based on philosophy and logic. We can move forward from there. We'll find austerity beat false. Make Portland a great place to live and a model for the world. Thank you.
I've been a professor for the last 3 years at Concordia University, and I can't say that I've ever been much of a fan of having a ton of authority over people's lives. And one of the things that I've learned about teaching is that it's a very unique type of authority, because it's one that if you do your job well, you destroy your own authority in the process. And I really like that sort of model for management, is that if you do a good enough job of getting people to do their jobs and you spend enough time on the human side of it, then you don't have to have these top-down sort of authority going on. That being said, like Joe says, there are big issues within the city bureaus with transparency and accountability, and I think that we need to come in and clean up a little bit, and we need to institute new rules. I think right now, city council, regardless of elections, can always put new ethical duties on itself, can always put new transparency requirements, and they should be doing it right away. We shouldn't be waiting for new people to come in and do these ideas. So those would be my first priorities, and I guess those would require a top-down approach, but generally I like the softer approach, I'd say.
Could you repeat the question?
Of course. One role of a city commissioner is manager of a large bureau. Describe your management experience and style.
Well, my management experience, I've overseen basically every bureau, almost every bureau in the city government in the 16 years I've had the pleasure and honor to serve on the city council. I think, I expect my managers to be very competent and very hardworking, and I've found that to be the case by and large. And I expect them to be candid with me, and I welcome candor. I guess that's part of my management style. I take criticism well, and I can probably dish it out well too. And I'm not afraid to, candor is a two-way street. And I expect very high performance, and I think that's about, like I said, I think most city employees are very hardworking people, and those are the expectations I hold them to.
Thank you. Question from the audience, and that will begin with Mr. Caleb. What specific source of increase in revenue will you support to legislate directly or refer to voters?
Okay. Well, I mentioned the sort of proposal for a living wage tax would be one source of revenue that I would seek to bring in order to subsidize equitable pay from the bottom up. I'm also interested in seeing the development of the street fees that Commissioner Novick has been proposing. I think it's interesting. I like that there's some progressiveness in the tax. I also would look to let voters make the decision on this one.
Okay. Mr. Saltzman?
Well, my biggest quest right now with respect to additional taxes is finding a permanent source of funding for the Portland Children's Levy. Right now it's a 5-year local option levy, so it has to be renewed every 5 years. So I'm looking for a way to, with voters, again, voters' approval, create a permanent funding source, perhaps similar to what Multnomah County Libraries did with a library district. So that would be my top priority for a new tax mechanism.
Thank you.
Well, I don't think we need a new tax. Every time we see a report coming out of the auditor's office, it's about misplaced spending. It's just last week, it was about the Portland Department of Transportation. They don't even know what they want to do next. They do ad hoc spending on this project and the next. Before we ask voters for more money, let's clean up our own house. We know there's plenty of places we can find that money. Take a look at auditors' reports. First, it was the Water Bureau, Department of Transportation, plenty of places to save money. Thank you.
Another question from the audience, and we'll start with Mr. Saltzman. What do you think about apartments being built in existing neighborhoods without any provision for parking? And what is the impact on the neighborhood?
Well, there has been a huge impact, and that's something that the City Council has changed already. We now require developments to have some minimum parking. It may not be as high as people wish, but every development now must have some minimum parking, so there's no more developments that don't have to have any parking.
And Mr. Meyer?
Thank you. If you want to see what's wrong with City Hall politics, walk down Division Street. Development is out of control there. There's no one looking out for the citizen interest. Developers have found a pile of money in the street because they can now all of a sudden build these new apartments. Portland City Hall can put not any kind of constraints, they can put significant constraints on there to have those buildings more neighborhood friendly. We need to get the neighborhoods involved in the process. I've been saying it quite a bit. There's just no one representing the average Joe at City Hall. When something comes before council, the developer gets first choice. I don't know what else to say about that, except the question was specifically about parking, and it's certainly impacting me. There's a new development across the street from me, and parking is contentious. The commissioner mentioned that he brought back, I think, 1 parking spot per 4 or something like that. I think there are more creative solutions, more solutions that are cognizant of things like global warming. How about having 10 car shares outside of an apartment instead of encouraging everyone to have their own car? Lots of good ideas. We have to find a way to get there without the guy getting paid. Thanks.
Like Joe, I'm a bicycle commuter. I drive occasionally, but I'm primarily on my bike all the time, no matter where I'm going. And so at first glance, getting more cars off the street doesn't make me feel particularly sad. But then again, I think what's problematic with our development is that we're pretending that we're doing these environmental green building developments, and then we sort of as an afterthought say, oh, we're not allowing cars because it's an environmental issue, and I don't think that I agree with that at all. I think it's sort of a post facto rationale for it. I think if we're not going to be providing space for cars, we have to make public transportation extremely cheap. We can't do both at the same time. TriMet can't continue to raise rates at the same time that we're taking cars off the street. Some of the thing has to change, and that makes it interesting and difficult because we're talking cross-jurisdictionally now, but the city can subsidize transportation for students. We might be able to subsidize transportation for folks that would like to use public transportation. And making streets safer and having protected bike lanes is also a way of encouraging people to pick up active transportation.
Thank you. We have time for one more question from the audience. And audience questions are great. We appreciate them. I'm sorry we can't get to all of them. Recently, there was an issue with a Trader Joe's store on MLK. What can the City Council and the PDC and the rest of us learn from that? Beginning with Joe.
Oh, certainly you want to go to the neighborhood first, not second. That's the experience I had. There was a proposed development right across the street from me. I mentioned it before. and the developers already met a half a dozen times with the city and they had their plan ready to go. And then they come to the neighborhood association and say, don't you like it? And we felt in my neighborhood that the development was in violation of several parts of city code. We brought it down to LUBA, and Portland brought their lawyer down and beat us on most counts. So again, we need to find a way to get neighborhood-centric housing. Neighborhoods are what make Portland great. Developers want to make a buck and get out. It's our citizen responsibility to take control of that. I'm Joe Meyer. I hope I can help do that.
I totally sympathize with the concerns of the neighborhood. I'm like Joe. I think that if you don't include neighborhoods, neighborhood associations, people in the neighborhood in decision making, then of course that they're going to be upset about the things that come in if they don't think that they fit within the character of the neighborhood. I think that there's plenty of room to, as I've said with a few different issues tonight, for making creative inroads at involving communities early on in the process and not just in a token way where you sort of, Portland's kind of famous for having these public forums where everything's already been decided and then you get to come in and kind of decide what wrapping it's going to be put up in. That's not democracy to me. I think democracy includes the ability to say no and to have actual decision-making process up front. So in approach, I've talked about a few ways you could do that. That's how I think about these problems.
Thank you.
Well, the neighborhood is by no means monolithic in its opinion about Trader Joe's. I've talked to many people who want to see Trader Joe's there, as I have talked to people who do not. I think that Trader Joe's was more of a lightning rod for another issue, and that is the lack of affordable housing and increasing displacement or gentrification that's occurring in North and Northeast Portland. And towards that end, I hope Trader Joe's will come back, but also towards that end, the mayor and I have announced we're going to spend an additional $20 million over the next 5 years on affordable housing in North and Northeast Portland. And we're not doing that from a top-down approach. We're going to do that by engaging the community, the whole community, in the conversation about what that affordable housing should look like. Should it be family-based? Should it be individual homes? Should it be multifamily? And then secondly, dealing with the issues around displacement. As I mentioned earlier, an idea I have where any new developments with public dollars would have to set aside 50% of the units for people who already live in the neighborhood. I think these are the types of ideas and strategies that we need to engage in at this time.
Thank you. That concludes our questions. At this time, each of our candidates has an opportunity for a 1-minute closing statement, beginning with Joe Meyer.
Thank you. Our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate, friends. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. This is the poem that I read to my kids almost every dinner when we were growing up. And after a while, it has a little effect on you. I think we all know to a certain extent how decisions are made in City Hall. 4 or 5 powerful guys get together in a back room, and then they sell it in a PR campaign. This is not good for the citizens. It's bad because we miss the good ideas. It's bad because it's disrespectful to the citizens. There's a Princeton study just last week in the New York Times that shows the U.S. is not a democracy anymore. We're an oligarchy. And that was interesting. They proved it by regression analysis. And I think many of us had a vague feeling that something wasn't right for a while now, whether it's grinding cuts to our public schools, a weakening of our labor system, a tripling of our water rates. Who's in charge here? We need to get money out of politics. I'm not raising any money. Let's get out of the JTTF. Let's get control of our water bureau. Let's give Portlanders the freedom to prosper. I'm Joe Meyer. I hope I can have your vote. Thank you. Mr. Caleb?
So I'm a young guy, and as you can see, probably people probably don't even look my age. And I'm really scared about the future. And people that are younger than me and people around my same age, we don't know what we're going to be moving into. The economy sits on the verge of collapse at all times, and when we do economic development, we're told that you can't ever, we're never going to receive retirement if things are going on this way. The global warming is going to wreak havoc everywhere on the planet. So when we talk in these public forums, a lot of times we talk about very specific sort of policy choices that are kind of tinkering around the edges of what already exists. I'm a big proponent of huge cultural change. Outside of running for office, most of my activities are around activism and trying to raise consciousness in different ways and educate people as to why we don't have to accept the broader logics. We don't have to live in communities that are full of pollution from industrial districts because we're trying to incentivize growth by this sort of broad abstract standard that means nothing anymore when people have trillions of dollars and others have pennies. It's absurd on a lot of different levels. I think Portland can be one of those places where we actually pioneer a human-centric, environmental-centric way of being. We've got the culture for it, now we just have to make the rules that actually work along that way.
Thank you. Mr. Saltzman?
Well, I want to thank the League for sponsoring this forum again today, and I guess I would simply close by saying it's been an honor and a pleasure to be your city commissioner, and I think we all love the city. We all recognize there are problems. My focus throughout my tenure has been on really 3 issues. One is putting families and children first, working hard to make sure children are safe and successful. Secondly is a greener Portland, which means not only more sustainable Portland, but really, as I said earlier, good economic opportunities for our citizens, a higher standard of living and equal pay. And finally, making government work and making sure your taxpayer dollars are spent well. And I think I have a number of accomplishments that can speak to that, and I've been known to be cranky when I think we're not spending your dollars wisely, and I will continue to do that with your support, and I ask for your support on May 20th. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well, all of you. This concludes the Portland City Commissioner Position 3 Forum, and we certainly thank each of our candidates for participating. And thanks also to our timekeepers and the rest of our volunteers. Please check our website, lwvpdx.org, to view all of our forums on demand and for replay dates, times, and channels for local access cable television. Pick up the League of Women Voters Voters Guide at the public library. Online, check vote411.org for a preview of your personal ballot. Election Day is May 20th. As with all Oregon elections, you will receive a mail-in ballot. Ballots must be mailed back early or delivered to an official drop-off site anywhere in Oregon by 8 o'clock on Tuesday, May 20th. Postmarks do not count. This is Debbie Kay for the League of Women Voters of Portland. Thank you for watching. Please be an informed voter. And remember, your vote counts, and encourage your friends and neighbors and family to vote as well. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was fun.